Anything the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. That saying does not promise ease, it does not comfort, and it does not draw a smooth path. On the contrary, it poses a silent but profound question: if what humans achieve originates from how they think and believe, then what is truly controlling each person's life in seemingly ordinary days? Many people live their entire lives in a state of busyness but rarely pause to ask why all their efforts keep bringing them back to the same point. Some work tirelessly yet remain in shortage. Others learn a great deal but still feel lost. Some carry big ambitions yet grow more exhausted the further they go. It is as if an invisible force is always pulling them backward. The problem does not lie in a lack of effort. The problem lies in what those efforts are guided by. This material is not about quick tips, it does not promise shortcuts, and it does not try to encourage with sweet words. It goes straight to a more uncomfortable question: why do two people with similar abilities and similar starting points end up with completely different results? What makes some people always find opportunities even in adversity, while others only see obstacles even when standing in the exact same situation? Here, the focus is not on external circumstances but on the internal structure. How a desire is formed, how a belief takes root, how thoughts are repeated until they become habits, and how those habits quietly guide daily actions. Whether people realize it or not, what seems invisible is actually the foundation of every visible result. What is confusing is that most of the forces that dominate life do not make noise. They do not appear as major events but as small choices repeated over and over. One hesitation, one procrastination, one self-doubt, and over time, those small choices accumulate into a life trajectory that is very difficult to change. Not because people do not want to be different, but because they do not see the true starting point of change. This material places the listener before a paradox: to change the result, you cannot start from the result. To live differently, you cannot only fix surface-level behavior. Because behavior is only the final part of a long chain that begins with thought, is nourished by emotion, reinforced by belief, and then manifests outwardly as action. Ignoring those deeper layers makes every effort to improve only temporary. So the question raised is not how to have more, but how to operate more correctly. What is being nourished every day in the mind? What is being repeated until it becomes the default? And are those defaults leading life upward or keeping it stuck in a familiar loop? If every result begins with a thought held long enough, then which thoughts are occupying most of the inner time? If every limitation is formed from beliefs that have been accepted without verification, then which beliefs are quietly limiting the ability to live? And if the road ahead is not clear, is it because the direction has never been seriously defined? This is not an invitation to change immediately. This is an invitation to look back. Look at how your way of thinking has led your life to the present. Look at the things you still believe are obvious but may never have been questioned. Because sometimes the greatest change does not begin with a loud decision but with a silent moment, when a person first dares to ask themselves whether the way they are living is truly their own choice. And before diving into this podcast book, we encourage listeners to find out about and buy the book to fully experience the content. Because only when you read the entire book will you truly understand the issues you are hearing me describe. Please buy the book and support the author, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss any clips from B-Book. Now, let's begin this audio podcast book. In the early days, people often think that all major changes in life stem from noisy events or decisive actions in the outside world. But in reality, everything usually begins with a quiet thought, a very small but persistent desire, like a nameless gentle breeze that silently slips into the mind and then takes root. That desire is not mere greed. It is a primal driving force that pushes people forward despite all uncertainties. The greatest strength appears when a person knows what they truly want and is willing to pay the price for it with every possible effort. No one enters this world already knowing exactly what to do or where to go. But whoever has the courage to admit their own lack, and the patience to nurture that desire every day, will sooner or later find their own path. A strong desire does not come from vague dreams or empty encouragement. It is formed through each failure, each rejection, each morning waking up with the feeling of not having done enough for oneself. Everyone has the right to dream, but only those who are enough realize that those dreams must be made concrete into clear goals to have a chance of surviving in real life. For example, there was once a person who decided at all costs to become a partner of a famous person. That boldness did not come from favorable conditions but from a simple belief: if you don't try, you will never know what you are capable of. When a desire is strong enough, it naturally finds ways to manifest outwardly through bold, even irrational choices in the eyes of the majority. What seems irrational is the only ticket that allows a person to break through their old limits. It is the same as someone who has nothing in hand except desire, yet dares to board the destined train, dares to stand in front of the laboratory door of a great inventor just to say, "I want to work with you," and not as an employee, but as a partner. There is no guarantee of success other than stubborn perseverance that refuses to retreat, other than the attitude of accepting that one might lose an entire lifetime just to exchange for one serious attempt. Not every thought becomes reality, but every reality was once a stubborn thought. The strange thing is that when people truly want something, they no longer fear difficulty, no longer fear being judged, and no longer even fear failure. Failure at this point is only a test to see whether their desire is truly strong enough. Those who easily give up at the first challenge have never desired strongly enough. In each failure, what remains is not loss but a quiet lesson: just persist one more step, and everything could have been very different. The most important turning point does not come from luck but from the habit of not stopping even when rejected or obstructed. Successful people are not those who have never fallen, but those who understand that every opportunity hides within failure, only waiting for the person patient enough to reveal it. From another perspective, that patience is not simply endurance but the ability to turn every rejection and every failure into a paradoxical motivation that makes one desire even more on that journey. Sometimes, just one very small action, like standing and waiting in front of a factory gate with unshakable determination, can change the entire destiny of a lifetime. Not everyone sees opportunity when it appears. Because opportunity often disguises itself under the shell of difficulties, challenges, or seemingly hopeless failures. Opportunity rarely knocks on the door by itself. It demands that people go find it, dare to accept it, and dare to pay the price. Sometimes desire is even stronger than material conditions, stronger than intelligence or education. A person with no money, no status, no connections, but possessing an ironclad desire will go further than someone who only has vague ideals but lacks willpower. Every limit lies in the habit of choking off one's own bold thoughts. It is precisely at the moment when a person accepts that they may fail but still continues to move forward that they begin to win. The truth is that material wealth is only the tip of the iceberg. The deeper, hard-to-see part is the process by which each person learns to control and transform desire into motivation, motivation into action, and action into the habit of never giving up. Who dares to ask themselves, "Have I desired enough yet?" Who dares to look at the fear of rejection, dares to exchange safety for one truly bold act? Only that person can step into the world of those who master their own destiny. And then, from intense desire, an extraordinary strength gradually forms within each person. That strength is not a miracle that appears by itself but the result of thousands of times telling oneself not to give up, reminding oneself of the reason one started. If there is any secret at the beginning of every achievement, that secret lies in how each person defines and protects their own desire. Not allowing anyone or any failure to smother it. When desire becomes an unshakable will, no matter how harsh the outside world is, it is no longer an obstacle. Every object, every person, every circumstance around becomes raw material for the process of testing that will. The successful person is the one who dares to bet everything most precious on a goal, dares to live fully with choices that the majority finds irrational. Simply because deep down they believe that if they don't try, they will never know where their own limits lie. Try thinking about the hardest days. When in your head only rings the question of whether it is worth continuing or not. Just one time answering honestly, and people will realize that everything they once thought impossible was actually only a self-imposed limit. The paradox lies in this: the closer one gets to the goal, the greater the fear of failure becomes. But it is precisely at that moment that the greatest motivation appears, reserved only for those who never stop moving forward. The greatest thing about this process is not possessing material wealth, but gaining a special state of mind. A state where every failure is only a step closer to success, where every doubt and every fear dissolves before the desire to live truly with oneself. True character does not lie in words but in endurance. In the ability to stand up after every fall. In the belief that a desire strong enough will find its own way to take shape in reality. And that is how every great story begins, from a small but unquenchable desire. From days that seemed hopeless but were actually fertile soil for the will to rise. From times of being rejected but still continuing to knock on the door of life. Because people only need one strong enough thought, one time of refusing to retreat, to completely change their own destiny. Let desire lead you, but do not forget to turn it into real action every day. Because no one else but yourself can make the desire become reality. That is the only difference between a dreamer and someone who truly knows what they want. When that happens, each passing day is no longer just another day of living, but a day moving closer to what one has always desired. Even if one has to pay with everything one has, there will be no regret. From the beginning of a nameless desire, the journey of transforming thought into reality moves to another layer, where belief becomes an indispensable catalyst. In countless moments of uncertainty between success and failure, what decides is not who is smarter or stronger, but who can maintain belief in their own goal until the very last minute. Belief is not something innate, nor is it a cloak worn every morning to comfort oneself. It is the result of countless days of doubt, of unanswered questions, of free falls between skepticism and fear. There are people who have gone through failure after failure, but what keeps them from disappearing into the crowd is the ability to clearly visualize the result they desire. Despite every barrier, no one can teach anyone how to believe in things that have not yet happened. But whoever knows how to build a clear image of success in their mind will sooner or later turn it into truth. Each failure only makes that image more vivid, deeper into the subconscious, and more urging the self not to give up. Belief does not come by itself. It is created from the habit of repeatedly thinking positive thoughts about oneself and one's goal. When negative thoughts come, no one can avoid the feeling of doubt. But instead of letting fear take over, those who reach the end of the road learn to replace every doubt with self-affirmations. Every day, every night, they never stop whispering to themselves about a future they have already seen clearly in their mind. Even when reality at that moment is completely the opposite, the power of speaking to oneself surpasses every external influence. Each time they tell themselves they will succeed, the subconscious receives that command and turns it into a quiet motivation that guides every decision and action. There are people who once stood at the threshold of despair, with only one choice left: believe in themselves or give up forever. The strange thing is that the more they believe, the more every possibility seems to expand. When belief is strong enough, every smallest action becomes meaningful. Every smallest event turns into evidence that reinforces the image of success already planted deep in the mind. But belief is not magic. It needs to be trained, sharpened through each day of facing one's own doubts and the doubts of the world. People do not become invincible after one night but after thousands of times falling and then standing up again, picking up the fragments of belief to continue forward. In the darkest moments, just holding on to one piece of belief is enough to light the way for the entire long road ahead. Everyone thinks success belongs to special people, but in reality, it is the privilege of those who know how to persistently build belief. They do not let failure cool their desire, do not let outside noise blur their goal. Even when pushed against the wall, belief becomes the fulcrum to break through every old limit. And when belief has taken deep root in the subconscious, people no longer care about skeptical words. They are no longer caught in the vortex of fear. Every challenge now is only a test of endurance, a measure of the depth of belief. The difference between a person who always looks up and a person who hangs their head down is how they protect their belief in themselves. Whatever is repeated enough times will become reality. Because the subconscious does not know what is real and what is fake. It only knows how to obey commands from the conscious mind. That journey does not stop at blind belief. It requires people to continuously adjust their thinking, listen to themselves, and when necessary, be ready to change even the path, as long as the goal remains. People are not strong because of encouragement from others but because of their ability to lift themselves up after each time they doubt themselves. The paradox is that the more one believes in the irrational, the easier it is to create what has never happened before. While the majority only believes in what they have seen, those who create difference know how to plant the seeds of the future into every present thought. They speak to themselves about things that do not yet exist as if they already do, and live each day as if there is no other choice but success. And so, in silence, belief grows larger, overcomes every objection and every invisible barrier, bringing people closer to what once seemed most distant. Every great story does not begin with luck or talent but with unyielding belief and one thought, one image, one single goal that no one but oneself can see. Perhaps the deepest secret of success does not lie in the number of victories but in the ability to maintain belief every time failure visits. At that point, every limit is only an illusion, every fear is only a thin wall. And the person who persistently goes to the end will see that success is actually only the reward for those who have never allowed themselves to give up. And then, from that layer of belief, the next transformation takes shape. The way people can reprogram their entire destiny through their own language, through daily self-reminders, through the wordless power of repetition, through the ability to turn what does not exist into what must inevitably happen. There are days when the inner voice is stronger than everything outside. People often think that changing destiny is a big deal, but in reality, every movement begins with silent sentences spoken to oneself. Those words are not loud. No one hears them except their owner, but they carry more weight than the entire outside world combined. Autosuggestion is the act of reprogramming reality, of sowing a new seed into the mind, repeating it until that thought takes root in the unconscious. Sometimes, in moments that seem like despair, it is precisely thanks to never stopping reminding oneself of the goal and of one's real abilities, though still latent, that people overcome fear. Autosuggestion is not self-deception, nor is it deluding oneself about a perfect outcome. It is the art of persistence, sowing clear messages into the subconscious. Whatever is reminded often enough will become reality. The subconscious is like fertile soil. Whatever seed is sown will grow, whether flowers or weeds depends on the thoughts that have been chosen. Every day, every person talks to themselves countless times. Most of those conversations are filled with doubt, fear, and self-limitation. Those who know how to use the power of language, who carefully select the messages they send to themselves, will direct the entire trajectory of their lives. Repetition not only changes psychology but also awakens new motivational action, making every obstacle gradually shrink before their eyes. Not everyone realizes the power of autosuggestion because its effect does not come in one day or 1 week. The paradox is that the less one believes in oneself, the easier it is to be auto-suggested by fear and by invisible limits created by oneself. Successful people are not those who do not know fear but those who know how to use that very fear to create stronger reminders about their goal. When each thought is repeated long enough, it shifts from a vague desire into an unshakable belief, into a motivation that urges consistent daily action. In reality, there are people who once gave up simply because they could not control the negative whispers in their heads. The biggest trap is allowing unconscious autosuggestions to automatically guide every decision and choice, then convincing themselves that fate is already decided. On the contrary, the person who masters their destiny is the one who dares to take responsibility for every thought passing through their mind, dares to uproot old outdated messages, and dares to persistently sow new seeds for themselves. If you ask what distinguishes a person who rises above adversity from one who surrenders to fate, it is the ability to establish a new script for oneself through autosuggestion. Every morning begins with a self-reminder about the goal. Every night ends with a visualization of oneself having already succeeded. No need to show off, no need to share with anyone, only the subconscious needs to know clearly what is most important. Every action in the day will automatically arrange itself around that message. The strange thing is that once one has mastered the power of autosuggestion, one is no longer easily swept into the judgments of others. The mind is like a radio receiver, selecting the necessary information, eliminating noise, and keeping only what truly serves the goal. At some point, every action and every decision becomes aligned with the main thought that has been pre-programmed. This is not self-isolation but self-protection against the intrusion of negative messages from society, from people around, from a past that no longer fits. Every person has the right to choose the thoughts they nourish. Just like a gardener chooses seeds suitable for the soil, the climate, and their aspiration, and over time, that garden of the mind will only contain healthy, vibrant thoughts that nothing can shake. And when thoughts have taken deep root in the subconscious, there is no obstacle too great, no failure strong enough to shake determination. At this point, people no longer act on inspiration but according to the command repeated every day, every hour. Every doubt and every fear gradually gives way to consistency, to steadfastness, to the quietest yet most persistent motivation. On that journey, there is a principle that seems simple but determines every result. Whatever thought is nourished will gradually become reality. If a person repeatedly affirms belief in their own limits, those limits will grow with the years. If instead, every day they remind themselves that everything can change, sooner or later new paths, new opportunities, and new choices never thought of before will appear. How to choose the right kind of knowledge and turn it into a resource for oneself. Instead of just filling the head with information that has no practical value. Because not everyone who knows a lot succeeds, but those who know how to turn what they have into something that serves the greatest goal of their life. People understand that knowledge is not just the accumulation of information but experience, experimentation, filtering, and continuous application. It is here that the journey of transforming thought into reality moves to a new layer, where every choice and every action stems from a foundation of clear and deeply personalized understanding. When the wave of autosuggestion has stabilized in the mind, an inevitable question arises, quiet but sharp: after all, how much knowledge does a person need? Many people mistakenly believe that success belongs to the one who learns the most, reads the most, accumulates the most information. But reality is much harsher. Unfiltered knowledge is only a mental burden, not strength. There are minds full of knowledge but whose lives still stand still because they do not know what truly serves their goal. Valuable knowledge does not lie in quantity but in specificity. Only what is directly tied to the central desire has the ability to create real movement in life. The rest, no matter how sophisticated it sounds, only keeps people busy in the illusion of progress. Those who understand this early will not chase every trend, will not try to know everything, but will learn to focus deeply on one single direction where personal ability and life goal meet. There is a paradox that is hard for many to accept. Much valuable knowledge does not lie in classrooms or books but comes from observation, experience, and direct collision with life. Those who have been through it understand that learning from their own mistakes and from others is sometimes more effective than years sitting in a classroom. Each stumble, if looked back upon properly, is a lesson that no textbook can replace. What is important is not where one learns from but what one learns for. Knowledge only becomes power when it is put into concrete action. There are people who read a lot and speak well but do not dare to try. There are also people who know very little but apply everything they know thoroughly, and the latter group often goes further because they understand that unused knowledge withers by itself, while tested knowledge gives birth to wisdom at a deeper level. Specialized knowledge is not just information but the ability to connect scattered pieces into a meaningful picture. Those who master knowledge know how to ask the right questions, know how to find the right people, the right sources, at the right time. They are not afraid to admit they do not know yet, because they understand that admitting shortcomings is the first step to truly expanding ability. The humility in learning does not make a person smaller but makes the foundation more solid. It should also be said clearly about one thing that is often misunderstood: specialized knowledge does not mean boxing oneself in. On the contrary, it allows a person to dig deep into one field and then selectively expand into related directions, like digging a well deep enough to reach the underground water source instead of digging many shallow holes that never reach water. When the main vein is reached, all side branches can be nourished. Those who know how to utilize knowledge always spend time observing those who came before, listening to stories of both success and failure, then extracting the most essential parts. They do not copy but transform. They do not apply others' experiences directly to their own lives but adjust them to fit their own circumstances, abilities, and goals. This flexibility makes knowledge alive, not frozen into theory. And then, when knowledge has been selected, tested, and adjusted, it gradually becomes part of the person. At that point, action is no longer forced, decisions are no longer hesitant, everything happens naturally, as if the path had been drawn long ago. Outsiders may call it luck, but those inside clearly understand it is the result of a quiet, patient, and purposeful accumulation. What is noteworthy is that specialized knowledge also helps people recognize their own limits earlier, and that is not a negative thing. Knowing where one is not good helps save a lot of energy. Avoiding wasting time on races not meant for oneself. From there, people learn to cooperate and find those who complement their weaknesses instead of trying to carry everything alone. When desire is clear, belief is solid, autosuggestion has sunk deep, and knowledge has been filtered, a solid foundation is formed. This is the stage where many people think nothing has happened yet. But in reality, everything most important has been put in the right place. Outside may still be quiet, but inside, the structure of a new life is ready. No need for noise, no need to show off, just continue learning the right things, doing the right work, and being patient for time to prove the value of the preparation. Because when all internal factors have aligned with each other, the outside world will sooner or later be forced to change accordingly. When the internal foundation has been formed, people begin to face a capacity that is often misunderstood and underestimated: imagination. Many people think imagination is escaping reality, daydreaming vaguely, but the truth is completely the opposite. Imagination is where every tangible value begins to be conceived. No construction has ever appeared on the ground if it had not first existed clearly in someone's mind. Imagination does not arise from emptiness. It operates like a workshop where existing experiences and seemingly scattered observations are assembled into new capabilities. No one creates from nothing. But those who know how to imagine know how to restructure what already exists into something that has never existed before. Here, the difference does not lie in resources but in the way of looking. Two people look at the same reality, but only one sees the opportunity hidden behind the familiar shell. There are two common forms of imagination that often dominate human behavior. One is passive imagination, where thoughts float without purpose, only to satisfy momentary emotions. The other is active imagination, where the mind works with direction, with goals, with discipline. Only when imagination is placed under the guidance of a clear goal does it become a tool for creating wealth. Otherwise, it is only a hiding place for procrastination. Active imagination allows people to see the result before it appears, not through blind belief but through the ability to simulate in the mind each step, each movement, each possible obstacle. When the image in the mind is clear enough, external action will automatically find ways to adapt to move closer to that image. This explains why people with a clear vision usually act more consistently and waver less, even when circumstances change continuously. The paradox is that society often honors hard work but underestimates the capacity of imagination. While labor without imagination only creates repetition, and imagination without action creates no value. The breakthrough always lies at the intersection of these two factors. Those who only know how to follow will never break out of the existing framework. Those who only know how to think but not act will be trapped in ideas. Only those who know how to use imagination to guide action move to another level. There are very small but decisive moments. When an idea flashes up, most people dismiss it because they think it is not realistic. Those who go far are those calm enough to hold on to that idea, observe it, nurture it, and then find ways to test it in reality. At this point, imagination is no longer daydreaming but a draft for the future, waiting to be verified. What is important to understand is that imagination does not need immediate social recognition. Many ideas when first appearing are seen as strange or even crazy. But the value of an idea does not lie in the initial reaction of the majority but in the ability to implement it to the end. Those who know how to imagine do not ask whether others believe or not. They ask whether they themselves have understood that idea deeply enough. Imagination is also the place where people learn to escape old limits. Those limits mostly do not come from circumstances but from thinking habits. When the mind only repeats what it already knows, it closes the door to new possibilities. Imagination opens that door, not with physical strength but by allowing oneself to think differently, even just a little. At this stage, people begin to realize that it is not a lack of opportunities but a lack of the ability to see opportunities. Imagination is precisely the capacity to see through the surface of things to the deeper structure. From there, every problem is no longer an obstacle but raw material for creation. Every difficulty is no longer a reason to stop but a signal that a new approach is needed. When imagination has been awakened in the right way, people no longer passively wait for perfect conditions. They begin to act with what they have while still keeping a clear image of where they want to go. This is the moment when thought and action begin to go hand in hand, no longer separate. From then on, every step, no matter how small, carries meaning because it lies within a big picture already drawn in the mind. And it is right here that an inevitable need appears. No matter how sharp an idea is, it will disappear if it is not placed into the order of action. Imagination has opened the door, but only a plan can lead people across that threshold. When the idea is clear enough, the pressure to organize, to arrange, to act systematically will naturally form. Like an unavoidable step forward in the journey of turning mindset into reality. The door has been opened by imagination. The road ahead is no longer a question of whether or not to go, but how to go correctly. An idea, if not placed into order, will quickly dissolve like water without banks, flowing away without leaving a trace. It is at this very moment that organized action-oriented thinking becomes the clear dividing factor between those who only see and those who truly move forward. Not everyone with an idea needs a perfect plan right from the start. What is more necessary is a structure of action clear enough to begin, flexible enough to adjust, and durable enough not to be broken by initial failures. Many people procrastinate because they think the plan must be complete before they dare to act. But reality shows that the plan only becomes complete in the process of colliding with reality, never before. Organized action is not forcing oneself to follow a rigid route. It is the ability to arrange steps in order of priority, knowing what needs to be done first, what can wait, and what must be eliminated. When the goal is clear, every action that does not serve that goal becomes noise. Those who go far are those who know how to say no to things that seem busy but do not create real progress. In the process of action, failure is inevitable. But failure is not a sign of the wrong path but feedback. It tells which method is not effective, which timing is not suitable, or which resources need to be supplemented. Inexperienced people see failure as a conclusion. People with vision see failure as data. This approach creates long-term difference. There is one truth that is rarely accepted: action without organization consumes energy faster than not acting at all. When everything happens in a mess without order, people easily fall into mental fatigue, self-doubt, and then give up. Organization is not to control life but to protect energy, protect focus, and protect the initial motivation that was already so difficult to form. The right plan is not a plan that never changes. On the contrary, a living plan is one that allows mistakes and allows correction. Those who understand this are not afraid to go back a step, not afraid to abandon a direction they were once very passionate about. They only fear standing still. Because standing still means letting time and circumstances decide instead of themselves. There are times when everything deviates from the initial plan. It is precisely in those moments that true character appears. Those lacking organization will panic, while those with structure will adjust. They do not deny difficulties, nor do they exaggerate them. They look straight at them, reassess resources, and continue forward on a different path, but still toward the same destination. What is important is to understand that organization does not kill creativity. Organization is the skeleton so that creativity has something to hold onto and does not dissolve into momentary inspiration. When an idea is placed within a structure of action, it no longer depends on mood. Whether emotions go up or down, what needs to be done remains clear. This stability creates steady progress, the kind that pure inspiration can never guarantee. Here appears another paradox: people who act in an organized way often seem slower at the beginning, but they rarely turn back. People who act impulsively may advance very quickly in a short time but also stop very early. Time will clearly reveal the difference. It is not speed that decides the final result but the ability to maintain direction for a long enough time. Once action has order, a new pressure appears, not from outside but from inside. That is the pressure to decide. Every plan, no matter how good, will collapse if the person implementing it keeps hesitating. Hesitation is not because of lack of information but because of fear of responsibility. But there is no decision without cost. Not deciding is also a decision, and usually the worst one. It is from here that the journey moves to the stage where willpower is tested most strongly. The ability to decide decisively and maintain effort when emotions have dried up becomes the clear boundary between moving forward and standing still. When organization is in place and the path has appeared, only one question remains: who has enough character to continue to the end? The path has appeared clearly enough. People begin to hit the most difficult invisible wall. That is not the lack of ideas or the lack of plans, but hesitation and the fear of taking responsibility for a decision. Many lives stop right here, not because they made mistakes but because they did not dare to continue. Decision is the moment a person separates themselves from the crowd, because the crowd always waits for more signals, more assurance, more consensus from outside. People who decide quickly are not reckless but because they understand that no choice is perfect. Every decision carries risk. But not deciding carries stagnation, and stagnation always takes away more than any mistake. Those who go far often make mistakes early, correct them early, and therefore advance earlier than others. What is worth saying is that decision does not require being right from the beginning. It requires decisiveness. A clear decision allows all energy to be focused in one direction, while hesitation causes energy to be scattered and worn away bit by bit. When the mind is stretched between many possibilities, no possibility is implemented to the end. After decision comes the next challenge, quiet but harsher: perseverance. Perseverance is not continuing while still interested, but continuing when emotion has withdrawn. At this stage, there is no longer the initial excitement, no longer fresh motivation, only habit, discipline, and loyalty to the chosen goal remain. It is right here that most people give up, not because they lack ability but because they cannot stand the monotony of the process. There is a very clear paradox: great results usually come very slowly, but failure comes very quickly. If one does not understand this, it is easy to mistakenly think one is on the wrong path just because results have not yet appeared. While in reality, results are accumulating quietly in the form of skills, experience, relationships, and continuous refinement of methods. Those lacking perseverance look at the surface and become discouraged. Those with perseverance look at the process and continue. Perseverance is not stubbornness. It requires the ability to distinguish between goal and method. The goal needs to be protected to the end, but the method must be ready to change. Those lacking understanding cling to the old way and call it perseverance. Those with depth change the method but never change the direction. This disciplined flexibility creates long-lasting endurance. What makes perseverance difficult is the feeling of loneliness when no one sees progress. When there are no more encouraging words around, only the quiet dialogue with oneself remains. In those moments, every promise once made to oneself is put to the test. Whoever keeps that promise will continue. Whoever breaks it will return to the starting point, carrying a scratch in their belief in themselves. There are people who are very good at starting but very few who are good at maintaining. Maintaining is a high-level capacity that is not loud and is not honored immediately. It is shown through doing the right thing even when no one is watching. It is here that internal qualities become the deciding factor, not intelligence, not talent, but the ability to endure the process longer than others. The decision has been made and perseverance has been maintained long enough. A special phenomenon appears: the outside world begins to respond. Suitable people gradually appear, opportunities that once seemed distant begin to reveal themselves. The necessary resources arrive at the right time, not because of luck but because long-term consistency creates attraction. Others sense the seriousness and persistence, and they want to stand on the side of what is forming. It is at this moment that people realize going alone has limits. No matter how persistent individual efforts are, they need to be amplified. No one builds something great with just one mind and two hands. Resonance begins to play a central role, but resonance does not come from quantity but from compatibility. Not everyone should go together and not every moment should open the door to all. The decision to persevere and companionship meet at the right time. The journey moves to another state. Individual effort is multiplied, speed increases, and influence expands. But to reach this point, people must go through a long enough stage where no one sees, no one believes, and no one guarantees. That is why very few people arrive here. People no longer rush to seek recognition. They focus on maintaining the decision, sustaining effort, and selecting people who truly share the same direction. Because great achievements do not come from explosive moments but from persistence long enough to turn what no one believed into what no one can deny. The journey has gone far enough. A truth gradually reveals itself, clear but often overlooked in the early steps. No great achievement is created in prolonged solitude. People can start alone, endure alone, decide alone. But to break out of personal limits, a stronger resonant force than themselves is needed. That force does not come from a random crowd but from purposeful harmony between minds heading in the same direction. Resonance is not gathering for the sake of numbers. It is the state when many people bring different abilities but focus on one single goal. At that point, each thought no longer exists in isolation but is amplified, sharpened, and reflected through others. An idea standing alone may be fragile, but when placed in the right resonant environment, it becomes solid and grows much faster. The key lies in selection. Not everyone is suitable to share the thinking space. Some bring doubt, some bring stagnation, some only stand outside to observe. When those elements enter the resonant environment, the common energy is immediately eroded. Therefore, effective resonance always begins with elimination before addition. When suitable people meet, a special phenomenon occurs. The thought of one activates the thought of another, opening up possibilities that each individual alone could not see. It is not because someone is smarter but because the right collision between perspectives creates new depth. Here, competition gives way to support, the ego gives way to the common goal. A correct resonant environment does not eliminate individuality but makes individuality clearer. Each person keeps their own role, contributing exactly their strongest part. No one has to carry the whole burden, and no one stands outside. This natural distribution makes the process lighter even though the scale of work is much larger. What is important is to understand that resonance is not for seeking comfort. It exists to drive action, to raise standards, to force each individual not to be lenient with themselves. In that environment, stagnation is exposed, laziness has no place to hide, and half-hearted decisions are recognized early. The pressure here does not come from coercion but from the presence of people who are also serious about their own paths. There is a profound paradox: when people connect correctly, they become more independent, not more dependent. Because a good resonant environment helps each individual clearly see their own limits, learn faster, and correct mistakes earlier. Growth happens simultaneously. No one is pulled back, no one is left behind. However, resonance is not always easy. There are stages of disagreement, clashes of views, moments when the structure must be adjusted. These clashes, if handled correctly, become a source of energy that drives development. Avoiding conflict only compresses energy. Straightforward dialogue helps the common goal become clearer and stronger. At some point, people realize that the environment they place themselves in will decide the speed of growth. Alone for too long, thinking easily becomes framed. In the wrong environment, energy is eroded. In the right environment, potential is awakened. This has nothing to do with the number of people around but with the quality of interaction. The resonant force has formed. What was once very difficult begins to become feasible. Resources arrive faster, solutions appear earlier, and collective confidence is reinforced. Not because someone bestows anything but because the common thinking system has become strong enough to attract and use correctly what is needed. At this point, people are no longer simply pursuing personal goals. The goal has been elevated to a common vision where each person's success becomes motivation for others. Sustainability begins to form, no longer depending on momentary emotions or the strength of a single individual. When looking back at the path traveled, people understand that no step was superfluous, from imagination, organization, decisive perseverance to resonance. All are links connected to each other. Missing one link, the entire structure lacks stability. But when these links are placed in the right positions, a combined strength appears, far exceeding the total effort of each separate part. That is when the journey no longer depends on individual will alone. It is supported by structure, by people, by deep consensus on direction. At that point, what was once considered impossible is only a matter of time. Not because the world has become easier, but because people have become solid enough to step into a new stage of development, where every effort is naturally multiplied. At a certain point, people begin to realize that all external efforts are only the visible part. Beneath that exists a quiet but intense flow of energy that governs nearly all behavior, emotions, and ambitions. This is the primal instinctive energy, stronger than reason and more enduring than emotion. If not understood and directed, it easily causes people to scatter, create internal conflicts, or exhaust themselves in invisible struggles. But if known how to transform, it becomes the driving force for creation, mental endurance, and rare focus. This source of energy is neither bad nor good. Its nature is neutral, like strong electricity. Placed in the wrong place, it causes explosion. Placed in the right place, it operates an entire large system. Many people live in a state of being pulled by this energy without realizing it. They react instinctively, let emotions decide actions, then wonder why their lives are always chaotic. Meanwhile, those who master it do not eliminate instinct but learn to upgrade it to a higher level. What is important is to understand that primal energy tends to seek the quickest outlet, not necessarily the best path. If there is no clear goal, it will flow into short-term behaviors and immediate gratifications, then leave a long emptiness. But when a person sets a goal big and attractive enough, that energy automatically redirects, pouring all its force into creating, building, and pursuing that goal. This is not forced but a natural redirection. Transformation is not suppression but changing the destination of the flow. When energy is channeled into creative thinking, intellectual labor, into visualizing and building the future, it no longer causes internal disturbance. On the contrary, it brings a feeling of vitality, focus, and full of life force. Many people confuse controlling oneself with extinguishing life energy. The result is that they become depleted. Those who understand correctly experience the opposite: the better the control, the more energy they have. In this state, people begin to work at a different intensity, not doing more but doing deeper. Prolonged focus appears. Thoughts no longer scatter, emotions no longer fluctuate. This is the time when one can sit for hours with a problem without getting tired, thinking continuously without mental chaos. The energy that once caused instability now becomes fuel for creation and endurance. There is a noteworthy paradox: those who appear very calm and very disciplined are actually people who possess very strong primal energy. The difference lies in the fact that they do not let that energy freely push behavior. They tame it, lead it into work, into vision, into long-term goals. The calm exterior hides a powerful inner flow, always ready to act when needed. Once energy has been transformed correctly, people are no longer torn between desire and discipline. These two begin to merge. Desire provides motivation, discipline provides form. One does not eliminate the other but supports each other. This merger creates the state that many call working with one's whole being, not just with physical strength or intellect but going further. People realize that every form of sustainable creation needs this source of energy. Without it, ideas become bland, actions become mechanical. With it but without control, life becomes chaotic. True growth lies in the ability to keep that energy flow always moving but in the right direction, at the right rhythm, toward the right goal. A subtle change occurs: people no longer have to force themselves to try. Motivation comes from within, without needing external stimulation. Pursuing the goal is no longer a burden but becomes a natural state. It is at this moment that the foundation for deeper layers of mental strength begins to form. Because when primal energy has been transformed, another door opens. That is the door leading to the quiet but more decisive operating region. The region where all beliefs, habits, and living reflexes are hidden, controlling life from behind the scenes. To continue, people must understand and work with that deep layer, where every surface change becomes meaningless if it does not touch it. The flow of energy has been led in the right direction. A deeper operating layer begins to appear. This layer is not loud, not ostentatious, but it controls nearly the entire life that people think is decided by will. That is the quiet operating region of the subconscious. Every repeated thought, every prolonged emotion, every belief accepted or rejected is stored here. Then from there, it quietly issues commands for behavior. What surprises many people is that humans do not act according to what they want but according to what the subconscious believes is correct. A person may say they want to change, want to move forward, but if deep down they still believe they are not worthy or not capable enough, then every action will automatically go off track. The subconscious does not argue, does not debate. It only executes commands that have been repeated long enough. The subconscious receives information in a very different way from the conscious mind. It does not distinguish right from wrong, does not distinguish real from fake. It only records what is put in with strong enough emotion and thick enough frequency. Therefore, the words one says to oneself, the images nourished in the head, the emotions held for too long, all become operating instructions. Those who understand this early will be more careful with what they allow to stay in their mind. What is important to emphasize is that the subconscious is not persuaded by reason but by repetition and emotion. Saying something once has no effect. Saying it in a state of doubt has no effect. Only when the message is repeated regularly with consistency between thought and emotion does the subconscious accept it. From there, behavior begins to change naturally, without force. Many people try to change their lives through pure conscious effort. They set goals, write plans, push themselves. But if they do not simultaneously work with the subconscious layer, those changes are usually not sustainable. After a while, people return to old habits, not because they are weak but because the internal operating system has not been updated. The subconscious is still running the old program, pulling everything back to the familiar point. When the subconscious is programmed correctly, a very noteworthy phenomenon appears. Behaviors that previously required a lot of effort now become automatic. People no longer have to remind themselves too much. Correct choices appear faster. Suitable reflexes form naturally. This is not losing freedom but achieving a higher form of freedom where one no longer has to fight with oneself. Every day there is a paradox that confuses many people. The more one tries to control the surface, the more the subconscious resists. But when people patiently sow seeds from within, the surface adjusts itself. Therefore, real change does not begin by forcing oneself to do differently but by changing what is regularly nourished in the mind. Where attention is given, that place grows. Where it is neglected, that place gradually fades. The subconscious is also the place directly connected to emotion. Emotion is the language of the subconscious, not reason. When a thought is attached to strong emotion, it is quickly recorded deeply. Therefore, experiences with high emotion usually leave long-lasting marks. Whether good or bad, those who master the subconscious learn to attach positive emotions to the goal, to effort, to the process, rather than only attaching emotions to the final result. At this stage, people begin to realize that habits are not the enemy but a tool. Bad habits form from an undirected subconscious. Good habits form when the subconscious is programmed with purpose. The difference does not lie in luck or circumstances but in who is holding the control of this operating layer. Whoever abandons it will be led by it. Whoever understands and works with it will be able to lead their own life. Once the subconscious has been adjusted, a subtle change occurs in the way people interact with the world. Reactions become calmer, choices become more accurate, and the feeling of being lost gradually disappears. Not because everything becomes easier but because inside there is now a stable guiding system. At this time, people no longer react according to circumstances but act according to direction. From here, another door opens, wider and harder to grasp with words. That is the way the brain connects with the surrounding environment, the way thoughts emit signals and receive feedback. When the subconscious has stabilized, the brain begins to operate like a transceiver station, not only processing information but also adjusting the frequency of interaction with the world. And it is at this point that many things that once seemed random begin to reveal a deeper order. The subconscious has been rearranged. A subtle movement begins to occur in the way people interact with the world. The brain is no longer just a place for reasoning but becomes a continuous transceiver station, quietly adjusting the way people connect with circumstances, people, and opportunities around. This does not happen by magic but through the long consistency of thought, emotion, and goal. Every thought carries a form of signal. When thoughts are clear, stable, and focused, the emitted signal also becomes coherent. The brain at this time operates like a sophisticated filter, automatically receiving information, people, and situations that match the internal state. Not because the world changes according to personal will, but because people begin to see and respond to what they previously overlooked. This explains why two people in the same situation have completely different results. The difference does not lie in the environment but in the way their brains interpret and respond to that environment. A person with a chaotic mental state will receive scattered signals, react hastily, and then confirm to themselves that life is full of risks. A person with a stable mental state will see structure, connections, and possibilities, then act with more purpose. The brain is especially sensitive to emotion. Emotion is like an amplifier for the thought signal. When thought is attached to positive emotion, the emitted signal is stronger and clearer. When thought is pulled by prolonged fear, anger, or doubt, the signal becomes distorted. Therefore, maintaining a stable emotional state is not to feel more comfortable but to keep the transceiver system operating accurately. There is a phenomenon often called luck. But looking more closely, luck often appears in people who have the ability to recognize and see signals at the right time. They do not know the result in advance, but they recognize the signs, not vague intuition but a combination of experience, a programmed subconscious, and subtle observation ability. Their brain has become accustomed to seeking opportunities, so when opportunities appear, they do not miss them. When thoughts and emotions are kept at a consistent level, the brain begins to eliminate noise, negative words, fears without clear source, thoughts that disperse energy, gradually losing influence. This does not mean difficulties disappear, but they no longer dominate the entire perception. People at this time can face problems without being overwhelmed by them. A key point that needs to be clearly understood: the brain does not operate independently from the environment but continuously adjusts based on what it emits and receives. When the internal state changes, the relationship with the outside also changes accordingly. People who were once unsuitable gradually leave, new connections appear. Not because of deliberate choice but because natural compatibility forms. People begin to experience a form of synchronization, thought, action, and circumstances begin to fit together. There is no longer the feeling of having to fight against the world. Instead, there is the feeling of moving in rhythm with the flow. Important decisions appear in a state of calm, without haste, without panic. The brain is no longer overloaded because it does not have to handle prolonged internal conflicts. This does not happen overnight. It is the result of maintaining the mental state long enough for the brain to learn the new way of operating, like a sophisticated habit that at first requires attention and then becomes natural. Outsiders may see unexpected results, but those inside understand that everything has been prepared from very long ago inside. The brain has become accustomed to receiving and emitting signals in a stable way. Another capacity begins to appear more clearly: the ability to recognize quickly without needing long analysis. This capacity does not oppose reason but goes beyond reason after reason has done its part. It appears as a quiet certainty that needs no explanation but rarely deviates when nurtured correctly. Many people confuse this capacity with impulsiveness, but in reality it is the quintessence of experience, subconscious, and stable mental state. When a person has gone long enough, observed enough, failed and adjusted deeply enough, the brain no longer needs to analyze every detail. It recognizes patterns and trends and gives appropriate action signals. This is when another layer of intelligence begins to play the guiding role. Not loud, not ostentatious, but strangely accurate. When inner strength is strong enough, correct decisions are no longer effort but become natural reflexes. And from here, the journey moves to the final stage, where people learn to trust that deep recognition, not through blind belief but through understanding that has been verified over time. And when that recognition ability becomes clear, people step into a state that previously only appeared fleetingly in special moments. That is the state of understanding without needing explanation, knowing without needing proof. Many people call it intuition. But in reality it is not something mystical. It is the natural result of an internal system that has been arranged long and deeply enough. Intuition does not appear in hasty people. It only appears when the mind is calm enough to listen, when the flow of thought has been filtered of noise, when emotions no longer pull one into familiar reactions, when the goal has been engraved so deeply that it no longer needs to be reminded every day. Then subtle signals have space to sound. At that time, decisions are no longer heavy but light like an inner consensus. What is important to distinguish is that intuition does not oppose reason. Reason collects data, analyzes, compares, eliminates. Intuition appears after reason has done enough of its work. It is like a conclusion drawn not in words but in overall feeling. Inexperienced people easily confuse impulsive emotion with intuition. Experienced people recognize the difference very clearly. Intuition always comes with a feeling of calm, without urgency, without panic. Intuition leads the way. People begin to act at the right time, not too early, not too late. They know when to advance, when to wait, when to withdraw. This does not come from excessive caution but from the ability to read the flow of events. Such decisions often surprise outsiders because they do not follow ordinary logic. But when looking back, the results usually prove that choice was the most reasonable in that circumstance. Intuition also helps people avoid wrong paths that reason has difficulty detecting. There are risks that do not appear on the surface but only show through a very light feeling of unease. People accustomed to listening to intuition will not dismiss that feeling just because they cannot find a clear reason. They pause, observe more, and thereby avoid unnecessary losses. This is not fear but alertness at a deep level. When this capacity is trusted at the right level, people no longer depend too much on external recognition. The inner compass is accurate enough to guide. They still listen to opinions, still learn. But the final decision is no longer dominated by the crowd. This independence does not create distance but creates solidity. Others sense that certainty and tend to trust and cooperate. Up to here, a circle closes, primal energy has been transformed, the subconscious has been reprogrammed, the brain has learned to receive and emit stable signals, and intuition becomes the highest layer of awareness where all elements merge into one. When the inside is synchronized, the outside is no longer a battlefield but a space for deployment. People no longer have to force the world to change because the internal change itself is enough to draw a corresponding response. This does not mean life becomes easy. Difficulties still appear, challenges still exist, but the way of facing them is different, no longer panic, no longer lost, no longer feeling swept away. Each problem is seen as part of the process, not a sign of failure. This very calmness creates the most sustainable strength. When looking back at the entire journey, people realize that no step was superfluous. Every layer is necessary. Without internal foundation, action becomes blind. Without action, inner strength is not tested. Without deep listening, decisions become rigid. Only when all are connected does a person fully operate their own capabilities. And at this point, the concept of success is no longer limited to money or status. Success becomes the state of mastering one's own direction, clearly understanding why one acts, knowing when to advance, when to stop, and not losing oneself in the process of pursuing goals. This is the deepest form of wealth because it cannot be taken away from the outside. When a person reaches that state, every material achievement is only a consequence, not something to chase after or prove. Inner strength is strong enough to create value by itself and the outside world simply responds to that. The journey at this time does not end but has shifted to a different rhythm, the rhythm of initiative, alertness, and sustainability. When looking back at the entire journey just past, one truth appears very clearly. Although not easy to accept, there is no shortcut leading to mastery of life. Everything that seems like a secret or a formula ultimately returns to one single point. People must change the way they operate from within before expecting the outside world to change. The biggest lesson does not lie in how to have more but in how to become a person solid enough to carry what they want to have. Desire, if not guided, will burn. Belief, if not nourished, will collapse. Action, if not organized, will be chaotic. And inner strength, if not understood correctly, will turn back to harm its own owner. Every part is linked. Missing one part, the entire structure will lose balance. Perhaps what is most uncomfortable in this whole thought is that it does not allow blaming. One cannot blame circumstances, others, or timing. Because once one understands that one's own thoughts, emotions, habits, and decisions are quietly creating the current results, responsibility lies nowhere else but in oneself. True freedom always comes with true responsibility, and that is a price not everyone is willing to pay. Many people ask why some people always go at the right time, right place, right direction. The answer does not lie in luck. It is the result of an inner self trained long enough to recognize the signal when it appears. Others also see that opportunity but do not recognize it. Or recognize it but do not dare to act. Or act but are not persistent enough to go all the way. The difference rarely lies in the moment but in the entire quiet preparation process beforehand. If there is a paradox worth pondering, it is this: to change your life, do not start by changing the world. Start by changing the way you think when no one is watching, the way you choose when no one is controlling, and the way you face yourself in moments of failure. The world always responds very accurately to your true self, not the self you want to show. At this point, each listener may ask themselves a very personal question. What in your current life is the result of old thinking habits? What is repeating not because of fate but because you have never changed the way you operate inside? If every result begins with a thought repeated long enough, then which thought is being nourished every day? Is it self-confidence or doubt? Is it proactivity or waiting? Is it responsibility or avoidance? There is also another question, harder but more necessary. If you continue living as you are now, what will your life look like in 5 years? And if you start changing from today, even if very slowly, very quietly, how different could that year be? No need to answer immediately. Just let that question stay in your head long enough for it to begin to cause discomfort. Because questions that cause discomfort are often the right questions. This journey does not demand becoming a perfect person. It only demands honesty with oneself, honesty about what one wants, honesty about the fears that are holding one back, honesty about the habits that are destructive, and honesty that no one else can live this life for you. Growth begins from the moment one dares to look straight without finding ways to avoid. If what has just been shared touches you at any point, perhaps it is not by chance. Maybe it is time to pause for a moment to see where you are going and why you are going that way. Not to judge but to choose again if needed. Because the right to choose is always there until you hand it over to old habits. If you feel these contents help you think more deeply about yourself, please follow the channel to continue these kinds of dialogues. Not to find temporary motivation but to build a more sustainable thinking foundation. And if any thought, question, or internal conflict appears while listening, please leave a comment. Sometimes just writing down one right question is enough for the process to begin changing. Life does not change direction in one day. But one day can be the starting point of a completely different direction. And that always begins from the way you choose to think, right at this moment. This is the complete, clean English version, translated section by section while maintaining the original meaning, tone, and flow as closely as possible. Giam bot li 30% Diduai de la fin ban tiing on da rutgun koang 30%, Jiu Nguyen y chin, Jong van truyen cam hung, mak lak va saw sak, nhung nongun, de ni hun. Anything the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. That statement does not promise ease or comfort. Instead, it raises a quiet but powerful question: if what we achieve comes from how we think and what we believe, then what is truly controlling our lives in ordinary days? Many people stay busy their whole lives yet rarely stop to ask why their efforts keep leading them back to the same place. Some work tirelessly but remain lacking. Others learn constantly but still feel lost. Some carry big dreams yet grow more exhausted the further they go. It feels as if an invisible force is always pulling them backward. The real problem is not lack of effort. The problem is what those efforts are guided by. This is not about quick tips or empty encouragement. It goes straight to an uncomfortable question: why do two people with similar abilities and starting points end up with completely different results? What allows some to see opportunities in adversity while others only see obstacles in the same situation? The answer lies not in external circumstances but in internal structure: how desires are formed, how beliefs take root, how thoughts become habits, and how those habits quietly shape daily actions. What seems invisible is actually the foundation of every visible result. Most of the forces that control our lives make no noise. They appear as small repeated choices, one hesitation, one delay, one self-doubt. Over time, these small choices create a life trajectory that is hard to change, not because we don't want to change, but because we fail to see the true starting point of change. To change the outcome, you cannot start with the outcome. To live differently, you cannot only fix surface behavior. Behavior is only the final step of a long chain that begins with thought, is fed by emotion, strengthened by belief, and finally expressed as action. Ignoring the deeper layers makes any improvement temporary. The real question is not how can I have more, but what am I nourishing in my mind every day? What thoughts am I repeating until they become my default? Are these defaults moving my life forward or keeping it stuck in the same loop? If every result begins with a thought held long enough, then which thoughts are occupying most of your inner time? If every limitation comes from unexamined beliefs, then which beliefs are quietly limiting you? This is not a call for instant change. It is an invitation to look back, to examine how your thinking has led you to where you are now, and to question what you have always accepted as obvious. Before we continue, we recommend you buy and read the original book to fully absorb its message. Please support the author. Now, let's begin. Everything big in life usually starts small, with a quiet thought or a persistent desire that slips into the mind like a gentle breeze and slowly takes root. True desire is not greed. It is a primal force that drives people forward despite uncertainty. The greatest strength emerges when you know exactly what you want and are willing to pay the full price in effort. No one is born knowing their path. But those who have the courage to admit their lack and the patience to nurture that desire day by day will eventually find their way. Strong desire is forged through failure, rejection, and mornings when you wake up feeling you haven't done enough. Dreams are common, but only clear, specific goals survive in reality. When desire is strong enough, it pushes people to make bold, sometimes irrational, choices. Those irrational decisions are often the only ticket to breaking old limits. Not every thought becomes reality, but every reality once began as a stubborn thought. When you truly want something, fear of difficulty, judgment, or failure fades. Failure becomes merely a test of how strong your desire really is. Those who quit at the first obstacle never desired deeply enough. The most important turning point is not luck but the habit of refusing to stop, even after rejection or setback. Successful people understand that opportunity often hides inside failure, waiting for the patient ones. Sometimes a single small act of unwavering persistence, like standing outside a factory gate with unshakable determination, can change an entire destiny. Desire can be stronger than money, status, or education. A person with nothing but ironclad desire will go further than someone with vague dreams but weak will. Real wealth is only the visible tip. The hidden part is learning to transform desire into motivation, motivation into consistent action, and action into the unbreakable habit of never giving up. From intense desire comes an extraordinary inner strength, the result of thousands of quiet reminders: don't quit. Remember why you started. Protect your desire fiercely. Do not let anyone or any failure smother it. When desire becomes unshakable will, no external obstacle can stop you. Next comes belief, the essential catalyst. Belief is not born, it is built through doubt, unanswered questions, and repeated self-affirmation. Those who succeed are not those who never fall, but those who keep a clear image of their desired future alive in their mind, even when reality says otherwise. Each failure makes that inner image sharper and deeper. Belief grows through daily positive self-talk. Speak to yourself about the future as if it has already happened. The subconscious does not distinguish truth from repeated suggestion, it obeys what you feed it consistently with emotion. Autosuggestion is the quiet reprogramming of your reality. Repeat the right thoughts with feeling, and they sink into the subconscious, eventually turning into natural behavior. Knowledge also matters, but not all knowledge. Valuable knowledge is specialized, filtered, and directly connected to your central desire. It is not about knowing everything but about knowing what serves your goal and turning it into action. Learn from experience and mistakes more than from books alone. Knowledge becomes power only when tested and applied. When desire is clear, belief is solid, autosuggestion runs deep, and the right knowledge is in place, a strong internal foundation is built. From this foundation rises imagination, not daydreaming, but the active ability to see the end result before it exists and to mentally rehearse every step. Imagination turns scattered experiences into new possibilities. It allows you to see opportunities where others see only problems. But imagination without action is useless. That is why a clear, organized plan is necessary. A good plan is not rigid, it is flexible enough to adjust while staying focused on the goal. It protects your energy and turns ideas into steady progress. Once the plan exists, the next test is decision-making and perseverance. Decision requires courage because every choice carries risk. Not deciding is often the worst decision. Perseverance means continuing when the initial excitement has faded, when only discipline and loyalty to the goal remain. Great results come slowly, while failure comes quickly. Many quit because they cannot tolerate the monotony. True perseverance is flexible, protect the goal but be willing to change the method. After enough consistent effort, the outside world begins to respond. Right people and opportunities appear. This is the power of resonance. When aligned minds work together, individual effort is multiplied. Resonance is not about numbers but about quality and compatibility. Choose your environment and companions carefully. The right environment awakens potential, the wrong one drains it. Beneath all this lies a deeper force, primal energy, raw, powerful, and neutral. If undirected, it creates chaos and short-term gratification. When properly channeled toward a big goal, it becomes fuel for creativity, focus, and endurance. When this energy is transformed, the subconscious, the quiet operator of life, can be reprogrammed. The subconscious does not argue, it executes what you repeat with strong emotion. Feed it the right thoughts and feelings consistently, and your behavior changes naturally. Finally, when inner systems align, the brain operates like a precise transceiver, filtering opportunities, recognizing patterns, and guiding you with intuition. Intuition is not mysticism. It is the natural result of long experience, stable mindset, and a quiet mind. It helps you act at the right time and avoid unseen dangers. When all layers, desire, belief, autosuggestion, knowledge, imagination, organized action, perseverance, resonance, energy, subconscious, and intuition work together, you reach true mastery. Success then is no longer just money or status. It is the deep wealth of directing your own life with clarity, calmness, and inner strength. There are no real shortcuts. Real change begins inside, in how you think when no one is watching, how you choose when no one controls you, and how you face yourself in failure. The world responds to who you truly are, not who you pretend to be. So ask yourself honestly, what thoughts am I nourishing every day? If I continue living as I am now, what will my life look like in 5 years? And if I start changing today, even slowly and quietly, how different could it be? Let these questions stay with you. The journey does not require perfection, only honesty with yourself. Growth begins the moment you dare to look at the truth without turning away. If this touched you, keep exploring these ideas. One right question can begin an entirely new direction in life. And that direction always starts with the way you choose to think, right now.